The Curse of Molly's Rest. In a quiet corner of County Clare, nestled among rolling green hills, sits Molly's Rest, a small, unassuming pub with weathered stone walls and a cheery red door. At first glance, it seems like any other cozy Irish pub, with its crackling fire, pints of Guinness, and lively chatter. But above the bar, sitting silently on a dusty wooden shelf, is the pub's namesake, a porcelain doll named Molly. The doll's glassy blue eyes seem to follow you as you move, her delicate hands clutching a small woven basket. Locals warn visitors to mind their manners around Molly, for the doll has been known to bring misfortune to those who don't. And more chillingly, the doll has a habit of showing up where she doesn't belong, like on the shelves of those who disrespect her. The tale of Molly dates back to the late 1800s, when the pub was owned by a widower named Eamon O'Donoghue. Eamon's young daughter, Molly, was the light of his life. When she tragically passed away from a fever, Eamon was inconsolable. Unable to let go of her memory, he placed her favorite porcelain doll on the shelf above the bar and renamed the pub Molly's Rest in her honor. Shortly after, strange things began to happen. Patrons reported hearing a child's laughter echoing through the empty pub, and small objects like coasters or pint glasses would disappear, only to reappear in unusual places. Some claimed the doll's position would change slightly overnight, her head tilted a bit more to the side, or her hands resting differently on her basket. At first, these occurrences were dismissed as the grief-stricken imaginings of Eamon and his patrons. But as the years passed, the incidents grew darker, and Molly's influence began to extend beyond the pub. One of the most terrifying aspects of the Molly legend is her ability to visit those who disrespect her. Several people who mocked or ignored the doll's presence have reported seeing her in their own homes, perched on shelves or bedside tables, her unblinking eyes watching them. One woman, a tourist from Dublin, admitted to jokingly calling Molly a silly old doll during a visit to the pub. A week later, she woke to find Molly sitting on her bedroom dresser, her delicate basket now holding a single dried flower. Terrified, the woman returned to Molly's Rest the next day and left a coin in the doll's basket as an apology. By the time she returned home, the doll was gone. Others have claimed that if they try to keep Molly or move her elsewhere, she vanishes and reappears back on her shelf at the pub. One man swore he brought Molly home as a prank, only to find her missing from his bag the next morning. When he returned to Molly's Rest, there she was, sitting serenely on her shelf as though she'd never left. One of the most chilling tales involves a young bartender named Liam, who dismissed Molly as a mere superstition. Late one night, after closing the pub, he jokingly placed a pint of Guinness in front of the doll and said, "Well, Molly, drink up if you're so magical." That night, Liam returned home to find his living room in disarray, chairs overturned, picture frames smashed, and a single muddy doll-sized footprint on the windowsill. Over the next week, Liam experienced unexplainable phenomena, lights flickering, cold spots in his home, and worst of all, the sound of faint giggles in the dead of night. When Liam woke one morning to find Molly sitting on his kitchen counter, her porcelain face cracked and her once empty basket now holding a single rusted coin, he fled back to the pub. Trembling, he returned the doll to her rightful place and begged for forgiveness. The haunting stopped, but Liam never set foot in Molly's Rest again. Locals believe the doll harbors the spirit of young Molly O'Donoghue, who watches over the pub but has little patience for disrespect. Regulars follow a strict set of rules: never touch the doll. Always greet Molly when entering the pub. If you hear laughter when no children are present, leave a coin in Molly's basket as an offering. Never stay in the pub past midnight. Molly grows restless as the clock strikes 12. If Molly appears in your home, bring her back immediately and apologize. Despite, or perhaps because of, its haunted reputation, Molly's Rest remains a popular destination for thrill seekers and lovers of Irish folklore. The pub's warm atmosphere and eerie charm make it a unique spot for those looking to experience something truly unforgettable. But for all its hospitality, the locals never fail to remind visitors of Molly's presence. As they say with a nervous smile, Molly doesn't like to be ignored, and if she visits you at home, be sure to bring her back, or she might stay a little longer than you'd like. The drowning specter of the Salty Gull. Perched on the rugged coastline of Donegal, the Salty Gull is a weathered pub with a long history of harboring sailors and fishermen seeking refuge from the sea's wrath. But along with its salty tales and hearty brews comes a chilling legend, the ghost of a drowned sailor who returns on stormy nights seeking a drink he never got in life. The story dates back over a century when a fierce storm battered the coast, capsizing a small fishing boat. The lone sailor aboard, a man named Chiron, swam desperately for the shore. Locals claimed they heard his cries for help as they gathered at the Salty Gull, watching the tempest rage from the safety of the pub. Chiron made it to the pub's door, soaked and shivering, but before he could enter, a massive wave crashed against the rocks and pulled him back into the sea. His body was never recovered, and his spirit is said to haunt the pub to this day, forever trying to find warmth and safety. Patrons of the Salty Gull recount strange occurrences on stormy nights. The pub grows eerily cold, and a faint scent of salt and seaweed lingers in the air. Then, without warning, wet footprints appear on the wooden floor, leading from the front door to a stool at the bar. Regulars know the routine well. The ghostly sailor orders a pint of stout by knocking on the bar with 3 sharp taps. The bartender, following local tradition, pours the drink and leaves it at the stool. The glass remains untouched, but a puddle of seawater forms around it, as though the sailor himself is sitting there. The footprints vanish the moment the bartender looks away, leaving nothing but the chilling memory of their ghostly guest. One fateful night, a new bartender named Liam dismissed the stories as mere superstition. When the wet footprints appeared, Liam laughed it off and refused to pour the spirit's drink, joking that the ghost could pay up like everyone else. The regulars fell silent, their faces pale with fear. The pub's lanterns flickered, and a cold wind howled through the room, though every door and window was shut. Suddenly, the heavy front door slammed shut, locking itself with a force no living hand could manage. Liam found himself alone as the patrons fled into the stormy night. The ghost made its presence known, knocking over glasses, rattling chairs, and scratching deep gouges into the bar's surface. Liam swore he saw a figure in the shadows, dripping with seawater, its hollow eyes staring straight into his soul. By morning, Liam was found outside the pub, soaked to the bone and muttering incoherently about the sailor's wrath. He left town the next day, never to return. Stories like this aren't unique to the Salty Gull. Nearby pubs like the Drunken Mariner and the Silver Anchor have their own tales of ghostly visitors from the sea. At the Silver Anchor, staff speak of a phantom ship's bell ringing in the dead of night, while the Drunken Mariner is said to be haunted by a crew of spectral sailors who sing mournful sea shanties during storms. But none of these stories are as unsettling as the tale of the Salty Gull and its drowning specter, who refuses to be forgotten. If you ever find yourself at the Salty Gull during a storm, heed the locals' advice. Pour the sailor his drink, never mock the legend, and always leave the pub before the final wave of the storm hits. For those who stay too long, the ghost may follow them home, leaving puddles and salty handprints in their wake, an eternal reminder of the drowned sailor who never made it back to shore. The specter of Flynn's Hollow. Nestled in a misty valley just outside Galway lies Flynn's Hollow, a charming pub with ivy-covered walls and a roaring fireplace. By day, it's a cozy retreat where locals swap tales and travelers stop for a pint. But after the sun sets, the pub becomes a place of unease, shrouded in a legend that chills even the most skeptical visitors. The pub's name comes from its founder, Seamus Flynn, who built it over 200 years ago. Seamus was known as a generous man, always ready to lend a hand or pour an extra pint for a friend in need. But in his final years, his demeanor changed. He became paranoid, convinced that someone or something was after him. Seamus would stay up late, pacing the pub and muttering under his breath. Locals claimed they saw him speaking to shadows, pleading with unseen figures to leave him alone. Then, one stormy night, Seamus vanished without a trace. The only clue left behind was a single muddy footprint, leading from his chair to the back door. Since then, strange occurrences have plagued Flynn's Hollow. One of the most infamous tales involves a traveler named Declan, who stopped by the pub on a rainy evening. Declan, unaware of the pub's reputation, settled into Seamus's old seat near the hearth. As the fire crackled and the rain drummed against the windows, Declan noticed a peculiar draft of cold air at his back. Shrugging it off, he ordered a pint and struck up a conversation with the bartender. But as the evening wore on, Declan began to feel uneasy. Every time he glanced into the corner mirror, he thought he saw a figure standing behind him. A tall, thin man with sunken eyes and a crooked grin. Yet when he turned around, the room was empty. Declan brushed it off as a trick of the light and continued drinking. But as he reached for his pint, he froze. The glass was ice cold, despite the warmth of the room, and his hand left a frosted imprint on the surface. Before he could react, a low, guttural voice whispered in his ear, "You don't belong here." Declan bolted from the pub, leaving his coat and pint behind. When the bartender went to retrieve them, the pint was gone, vanished without a trace. Locals believe that Seamus Flynn's restless spirit haunts the pub, bound to the very walls he built. Some say he guards a hidden fortune buried beneath the hearth, while others think he's searching for the person or entity that drove him mad. Patrons who dare to sit in Seamus's chair report unsettling experiences. Drinks are knocked over by invisible hands, the fire flickers and dies without explanation, and cold drafts seem to encircle the unlucky occupant. The most chilling accounts come from those who stay past midnight. Several have claimed to hear footsteps pacing upstairs, though the upper floor has been closed off for decades. Others have heard faint whispers in the old Gaelic tongue, urging them to leave. The pub staff has their own set of superstitions to keep the spirit at bay. They never leave a chair out of place, always lock the back door before closing, and leave a shot of whiskey on the bar each night as an offering to Seamus. Once, when a new bartender forgot to leave the offering, a keg mysteriously burst in the cellar, flooding the room with frothy beer. The next morning, the whiskey bottle was found empty, its cork lying several feet away. Despite its haunted reputation, Flynn's Hollow remains a popular spot for those seeking a taste of Irish folklore. But if you visit, heed the locals' advice. Never sit in Seamus's chair, and if you see a figure in the mirror, don't turn around. Whatever you do, don't stay past midnight, unless you want to meet the specter of Flynn's Hollow yourself. The Mourning Maiden of McGrady's Keep. Hidden on the edge of a windswept cliff in County Cork lies McGrady's Keep, an ancient pub known for its breathtaking ocean views and its bone-chilling ghost story. By day, the pub welcomes travelers and locals alike, offering hearty meals and lively music. But by night, the air grows heavy and the sound of weeping drifts through the halls. Locals say the pub gets its name from the tower ruins behind it, once part of a medieval stronghold. During a storm centuries ago, the tower collapsed, killing Maeve McGrady, the young bride of the castle's owner. Heartbroken and alone, Maeve's spirit is said to haunt the pub, searching for the love she lost. The most unsettling stories come from those who stay in the small guest rooms above the pub. Many guests have woken in the middle of the night to the sound of a woman softly crying outside their doors. The sobs are faint at first, but they grow louder and more desperate, as though the mourner is just inches away. One couple, visiting from Belfast, claimed they opened their door to investigate the sound and found the hallway empty, except for a damp, barefoot footprint leading away from their room. The same couple reported waking again later that night to find the window wide open, though they had locked it before bed. A cold gust of wind blew in from the cliffs, carrying the faint scent of salt and lavender. Staff at McGrady's Keep tell of eerie happenings in the main bar area as well. The chandelier above the bar, made from old iron and lit with electric candles, occasionally sways on its own, even when the air is still. Some patrons swear they've seen a shadowy figure reflected in the antique mirror behind the bar. A woman in a flowing white gown with her face obscured by a veil of mist. One bartender, Aidan, shared his own chilling experience. Late one evening, as he locked up alone, he heard a faint humming. He turned to see a pale, translucent figure seated at one of the corner tables, her hands folded in her lap and her head bowed. Aidan froze, too scared to move, but as he watched, the figure slowly lifted her head. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow, and her lips moved as though she was speaking, but no sound came out. Aidan bolted out of the pub, leaving the lights and doors wide open. When he returned the next morning, he found every chair in the pub turned upside down on the tables, though no one else had entered overnight. A curse or a tragedy. The haunting of McGrady's Keep is believed to be tied to Maeve's tragic death. Legend has it that she was locked in the tower during the storm by her jealous husband, who feared she was unfaithful. When the tower collapsed, Maeve's cries for help were silenced beneath the rubble, her spirit forever bound to the cliffs and the keep. Some believe Maeve's ghost is simply mourning her lost life, while others think she seeks vengeance. A few brave souls have tried to climb the cliffside ruins at night to communicate with her, but all returned pale and shaken, unwilling to speak of what they saw. Despite the ghostly tales, McGrady's Keep remains a beloved pub, known for its warm atmosphere and hearty stew. Locals say Maeve's spirit means no harm, so long as you show her respect. If you dare to visit, remember these rules. Never leave the window open after dark, don't mock the sound of crying, and avoid the corner table after midnight. Above all, don't try to climb the old tower. Maeve has little patience for those who disturb her rest. The Whispering Cellar. Nestled in the heart of Dublin, there's an old weathered pub called O'Malley's Lantern, its walls steeped in history and secrets. Beneath the laughter and clinking glasses lies something far more sinister, a cellar that the staff avoids at all costs. The pub, built over 300 years ago, is said to rest on the ruins of an ancient crypt. Over the years, whispers of strange occurrences have plagued O'Malley's, but the cellar holds the darkest stories of all. Staff and patrons alike have reported hearing faint voices coming from below. The voices are strange, soft, murmuring whispers in a language no one can recognize. Some say they sound like prayers, while others insist they're curses. The pub's owner, Patrick, dismisses the tales as drunken imaginings, but even he refuses to go down there after dark. One night, after a particularly busy shift, a new hire named Fiona volunteered to bring a keg up from the cellar. The staff immediately warned her against it, but she laughed it off, claiming she wasn't afraid of a few creaky floorboards and old pipes. As she descended the narrow stone staircase, the air grew colder with each step. The dim light bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the damp walls. Fiona stopped halfway down, her breath visible in the freezing air. That's when she heard it, a faint, sing-song voice echoing from the darkness. She called out, assuming it was one of her co-workers playing a prank. But the only response was a chilling silence, followed by the sound of something scraping against the stone floor. It was faint at first, then louder, as if something heavy was being dragged toward her. Terrified, Fiona turned to run, but her foot caught on something, a frayed, ancient rope lying across the floor. She swore it wasn't there when she'd entered. Struggling to keep her balance, she glanced back and saw what looked like the outline of a figure, standing motionless at the far end of the cellar. Its head tilted slightly as though watching her. Fiona fled, dropping the keg and racing upstairs. When she told the others what happened, they simply nodded grimly. "You're lucky," one of the older bartenders said. "Some don't make it back up the stairs." The locals say the cellar is cursed because the pub was built over a mass grave. Hundreds of years ago, the crypt beneath the pub was a place where plague victims were hastily buried. The bodies were forgotten, sealed beneath the foundation as the pub expanded. Now, strange events are commonplace. On quiet nights, staff report hearing heavy footsteps pacing the floor above the cellar, even when the pub is empty. Others have claimed to hear the faint sound of children crying, though no children have ever been allowed inside. One delivery man, new to the area, made the mistake of entering the cellar without knocking on the doorframe, a superstition the locals insist wards off the spirits. He came running back moments later, his face pale and his hands trembling. He swore he felt a cold hand grip his ankle and pull him to the floor. Perhaps the most chilling story comes from Patrick himself. Years ago, during renovations, workers found an old wooden door in the cellar, sealed shut with rusted chains. They broke it open, revealing a small, bricked-off chamber. Inside were dozens of bones, neatly arranged, and a single rusted chalice. From that day on, the activity in the cellar worsened. Bottles would fall from shelves, doors would slam shut, and strange symbols began appearing on the walls, scratched into the stone as though by unseen hands. Today, the staff of O'Malley's Lantern warns anyone who dares to enter the cellar. Always knock 3 times before going down. Never look into the shadows for too long, and if you hear whispering, leave immediately. Other nearby pubs like the Crooked Shamrock and McDonough's Rest tell similar tales of haunted basements, but none as terrifying as O'Malley's. One patron who ignored the warnings claimed he saw a pale, emaciated figure crouched in the corner, its sunken eyes gleaming in the dim light. When he blinked, the figure was suddenly inches from his face, its cold breath brushing against his skin. He left the pub and was never seen again. So, if you ever visit O'Malley's Lantern, enjoy the warmth of the fire and the camaraderie of the locals. But if you hear whispers drifting up from below, heed the warning. Stay far away from the cellar, or risk becoming one of the voices that haunt it. The Phantom Patron. In the quiet countryside of Ireland lies a quaint pub called the Rusty Anchor, nestled between rolling green hills. Known for its warm fire and perfectly poured pints, it's a haven for locals and the occasional traveler. But behind its cheerful facade lies a sinister tale that few dare to speak of. Late at night, when the bar stool's empty and the laughter fades, the bartender often notices something peculiar. At the far end of the bar, in the corner where shadows cling stubbornly to the walls, there's always an untouched pint of Guinness. No one ever orders it, yet there it sits, freshly poured, its foam still settling. Legend has it, decades ago, a man named Eamon frequented the pub. A loner with a haunted look in his eyes, he would sit in the same corner every night, nursing his pint and muttering to himself. One fateful evening, after a heated argument over a gambling debt, Eamon stormed out into the cold Irish night. never to be seen again. Some say he slipped into the nearby river in a drunken haze. Others whisper of a darker fate, his body buried beneath the pub's foundations, his death covered up by guilty hands. Now they say his spirit returns each night, drawn by the warmth of the pub and the pint he never finished. For years, the untouched pint was just a curiosity until strange occurrences began. One stormy night, as the rain lashed against the windows, the bartender Liam locked up alone. Just as he turned to leave, he heard it, a soft, wet clink of glass sliding against wood. His eyes darted to the corner. The pint was no longer untouched. The foam had vanished, and streaks of condensation trailed down the glass, as though someone, or something, had taken a long, deep drink. From the corner of his eye, Liam caught movement. A shadow darker than the room's gloom shifted in the mirror behind the bar. It wasn't his own. Slowly he turned, but nothing was there, just the faint scent of damp earth and the echo of a low, gravelly sigh. Since then, the untouched pint became a ritual. Liam began pouring it every night, fearing what might happen if he didn't. Patrons tell stories of their own encounters. Some claim that if you sit in Eamon's corner after dark, you'll feel the air grow unnaturally cold. Others have heard whispers, indistinct, guttural murmurs, too faint to understand, but chilling enough to send them fleeing. One traveler, defiant of the warnings, made the mistake of sitting in Eamon's seat. As he took his first sip of beer, his face went pale. He swore he felt a cold hand clasp his shoulder, squeezing tightly enough to leave red marks on his skin. That night he woke screaming, claiming to have seen a spectral figure looming over his bed, its face hollow and dripping with water. Locals speak of eerie phenomena when the pint isn't poured. Glasses shatter on their own, lights flicker even in perfect weather, and the jukebox plays eerie, warbling tunes long after it's unplugged. Once, a faint trail of muddy footprints appeared on the floor, leading from the corner stool to the bar before vanishing into nothingness. And then, there's the mirror. After midnight, it's said that brave souls who dare to look closely may catch a glimpse of Eamon. A gaunt figure with hollow eyes and a crooked smile, he stares back, lifting his pint in a toast. Some swear he winks before fading into the blackness. So, if you ever find yourself in that quiet countryside pub, raise a glass for Eamon. Just be careful not to spill his drink. He's been waiting a long time, and he doesn't take kindly to being disturbed. If you like creepy stories like these, please subscribe to the channel.